He's up here.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of
of the United States of America,
and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dear Lord, we just thank you for this day. We just ask you to be with us tonight. Give us the wisdom and the courage to make the right decisions. We just ask you to be over our city and over our citizens. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. Amen.
I'd like to call this evening's session of Jackson City Council to order. We will begin with roll call. Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Here.
Elliott.
Here.
Colby.
Here.
Peters.
Here.
Newkirk.
Here.
Crabtree.
Here.
Pop.
Here.
Mayor Evans, any recognitions or anything you have this evening?
None tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't believe we had anyone signed up to speak. So next on the agenda is the minutes that were in your binder from the May 22nd meeting. Is there any corrections or objections as presented to council? Hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented. Ms. Colby, is there a second? Mr. Newkirk, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The motion is carried. Next on the agenda was committee reports. We will begin with utility. Mr. Newkirk. No report. Thank you, Mr. Newkirk. Next, budget finance. Ms. Colby.
No report.
Thank you, Ms. Colby. Police, fire, and traffic. Mr. Foster.
I have one.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. Service, Mr. Peters. Thank you, Mr. Peters.
I just spoke to the auditor. He'll be here 3 minutes.
Okay, we'll skip the auditor to the end then, and we'll ask Mr. Kirby. You have anything?
I do not.
Thank you, Mr. Kirby. Chief Hinch.
No report today.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor's report. Mayor Evans.
I have a few things to report on. First, I want to talk about electric rates. A lot of people have been hearing about AEP's electric rates that have already taken place. Some of them up to 30% increases. And some people have asked us about how that's going to affect the city. And the good news is it's not going to affect the city electric rates. So, and I want to explain why. Our electric rates are basically have 3 parts, and I know you guys know this, but I'm going to try to dumb it down a little bit for myself here. But you have the cost of the energy, the cost of the electricity, then you have transmission, and then you have the city's markup, basically, the city's cost of getting it out to our residents. And what's going up for the AEP, the large amounts, is the cost of energy that they're buying off the market. And you probably recall that we receive our energy from AMP, and most of it is long-term contracts. And that has hurt us a lot in the past when the market rate for electric fell below what we was tied in to buy it for through our AMP. But now it's working the other way. Because we're not buying much of our energy off the market. It's coming through AMP at those contracts, and it's very favorable now compared to these new increased rates of the AEP. You recall in 2020, council reduced the city's charges on electric, reduced them by 10%. And since that time, we've not increased them any either. So bottom line is, right now, electric rates in the city of Jackson look very favorable compared to AEP's, and we expect that to improve even more in the next couple of years. Mr. Swackhammer has reviewed this with our electric consultant too, and he confirms all this. So it might be finally looking like investing in energy plants and going with AMP turns out to be a good decision for us. It certainly looks like that way in the next few years. and we expect people will be wanting to get on the city electric. So that's all good news. Secondly, you might have heard on the news, or I don't know if it's been in the paper yet, but last week, the Ohio Department of Development was in town, sent a representative down here, and named the Jackson as one of the top 100 micropolitan communities in the United States. And if you're like me, I'm like, okay, what is that? So we've done some research, and a micropolitan is basically an area, and in our case, it's Jackson County, an area between 10 and 50,000 in population, and they're ranking them on substantial economic development. The City of Jackson, as you're aware, we support financially the local economic development group. I'm on their board, and we work very closely with the Jackson County Economic Development Partnership, and this reflects their success in the Jackson County. And to put it in their words specifically, this award speaks to the effect of positive job growth, economic development, and quality of life improvements in our community. And in the United States, there are 542 of these micropolitans, and they ranked us as number 40. So we're clearly in the top percent. And another good piece of news that I'm going to try to explain a little bit, because I myself didn't understand it in the beginning, but it's a nice little recognition. And then also, there's still a lot of talk about the Appalachian Community Grant. The $500 million that's coming to Appalachia. That's been in talk for quite some time now, and it's just moving very, very slowly, and it's a very confusing process. But I know you've probably heard some things, because I have, about other communities that have received these grants. Well, they haven't even taken applications yet. But what they have done is assigned free planners. They've, I guess, granted free planners to the communities based upon the projects that they have submitted, initial submission. And Jackson, we put in 3 projects, and we've received planners on all 3 of them. We have met with a planner, which is Burgess & Nyepel. That's a big engineering company all over the country. And this week we have a meeting with an architect that works for them too. So we have put in, I wanted to let you know what those 3 projects are. I may have already told you, but one of them is for renovation of the memorial building. We know that somewhere down the road, somewhere in the near future, we're going to have to do something with that building. We're either going to have to save it or get rid of it. And I think the first part of this planner's work is to do a feasibility study on that to get their opinion of their professionals. The actually our number 1 project that we put in for this Appalachian Community Grant is for flood mitigation. We know that's an ongoing, continuing problem in Jackson, but any real solutions or any real projects that might help that even are huge mega projects, and there's a lot of money available through this. So we're hoping that maybe we can do something to help it at least. And we have a planner looking into that. They're looking at FEMA maps and flood hydraulic maps, and they are doing planning on that too to help prepare us to submit for a grant. And then the other one is for downtown revitalization. That's a real popular one that just about every community in the Appalachian area is involved in, just to help improve the old parts of town, the downtown areas they usually call it. And we'll begin planning to prepare a project in that area too. I had today, and I think you all were copied on it, an email from a park group or something. Tracy's been researching it, but I don't know if you've checked your emails or not. But that's one that's a multi-county that they're asking us. We might jump in and participate in that one. That would be developing some historic areas in the county. That's what that would be for. So just wanted to update you on that. Also, Paving, it's been advertised that we are starting paving today, and McKee Paving did come into town today to start paving. It's been publicized where they're starting, which is over on the southwest part of town, Grandview area, at Michael Drive area. That's where they started prep work today. They plan to start paving tomorrow. We got notice today that the ODOT project is going to start next week. Actually, repairs are going to start tomorrow. We, at the last council meeting, you appropriated some money to do additional repairs to East Broadway, additional full depth repairs. So they're going to start that this week and hope to be paving that finally by next week. This is an ODOT project, remember. They're controlling the schedule on that. So just wanted to update you on that. We did pave. If you haven't been to Hillcrest Park, you should go up there and look around. We did pave. We enlarged and paved the parking area, repaved the basketball courts. We restriped the basketball courts, including for where you can play pickleball on them now too, also. And it looks beautiful up there. You should all go up there and look at it because you're all part of it. You're all part of it. Finally, upon the recommendation of Service Director Swackhammer, I am appointing Anna Siders to the opening that we had on the Tree Commission, and that will take effect. She'll begin service there at the next Tree Commission. There was one planned for tonight that was postponed, but she will now be on the Tree Commission in place of Beverly Ondera, who had moved out of town. And then lastly, announce that next Monday is a holiday, Juneteenth in the city of Jackson. So next Monday's trash will be moved to Tuesday, and the city will be closed on Monday, just like a normal holiday. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
Questions for the mayor? Hearing none. Mr. Swackhammer?
Do we want to go back and let Mr. Reed go, or do you want me to go ahead and go?
He lost his place.
He
He has
lost
to go
his
to the
spot.
tail end of the line.
All right, well, I've got a few items. One item that's came up recently, and it's probably the second, at least third time maybe that we've talked about it in the last 4 years, is house numbering within the city. It still continues to be an issue. We have not had much luck in getting homeowners to take that responsibility, at least not those that are continuing to avoid it. So it's, what do we do now? There is a violation section. There is it's a misdemeanor. It's a $100 fine. It's for their own safety. We've heard from the fire department. We've heard from the police department. We've heard from others that house numbering just doesn't have some rhyme or reason in some parts of town, and it's hard to identify a home. So the next step is start enforcing some of these fines to try to get people to help themselves, I guess. So just want to let council be aware of it before we start reaching out to individuals and sending out mass mailings of people that do not have house numbers in compliance. Any questions on that one? Okay. Another friendly reminder, and not only on behalf of myself, but Mr. Lewis as well. We seem to be playing a lot of games with people getting permits and getting registered, and it's almost like catch me if you can. I hate to use it that way in those terminologies. But there again, we're going to have to start enforcing some of these violation costs associated with this, especially where we have repetitive projects from contractors where no building permits involved, or the homeowner doesn't seem to think they need to be the one doing that. So again, it's an unfriendly topic, but demo permits, the building permits, contractor registrations is all something we've worked very hard to get in place the last few years, and we continue to have violations by the same people over and over again. Part of that is to suspend contractors' registrations for not following, and that would be a step that we take as well. So just want council to be aware, because I know you guys will get phone calls too. Couple of items that's on the agenda tonight. There is one on there for the sale of city property. This is some vehicles and some old trash dumpsters. But another item that I want to talk about is the city has moved to online auction versus in-person auction. We've done that with our impound lots. We find it to be very effective, as well as the money is just as good. In some cases, it's been better. And I think Chief Hinch will, I see him nodding his head, will agree with that. It's very easy to do for these items like we're bringing tonight, whether vehicles or the dumpsters. The ones that I want to talk about here a little bit is we get various types of wire, used wire that we take out of service and so forth, and they usually end up in piles until the city has their annual auction. I've had one entity so far reach out to me around being interested in putting dumpsters in the city's impound lot or some other location and being able to fill those and purchase from the city on a per pound basis. What I would like to know is what council's thoughts are of maybe putting out a bid contract for, you know, a 1 to 2 year period for wire or other metals. And then another item is on the used telephone poles and electric poles, not telephone, electric poles. Is that something that council would be in favor of bidding out a contract like that? So if one, we don't have to accumulate 6 months to a year's worth before we have an auction, and we can keep it cleaned up and turned over on a more regular basis. And so maybe we can put that in the new business for a discussion then, Dan? Is
Yes.
that okay?
We shall.
I think that's where I'm going to leave it for right now until we get into the ordinances.
The chair does commend yourself and the mayor and all who were involved in the tearing down of our favorite building on Portsmouth Street this past week. Certainly cleaned that area up, I thought, quite a bit. Glad to see that building go down. Questions for the service director? Pete?
Mr. Schweckhammer, you talk about Mr. Lewis, and I've had people ask me about these yellow signs. I've read them, it's unsafe to live in. What goes on after that sign is put on there? Or is it tied up in court, or?
No, actually, the sign occurs, the little doorknob hangers, when Mr. Lewis cannot make face-to-face contact with an individual.
These are the
All, those,
the
the
notice.
bigger ones that are
Yeah.
actually attached to the buildings and
Right,
stuff. Those are really telling you that it's no trespassing, it's unsafe, so forth. We've done those to buildings that are, I'll say, what we can say is unsafe conditions. And the police can actually make arrests for trespassing on those if deemed necessary.
Is there a process that comes after that to tear down this?
No, these don't necessarily say they have to be
Okay.
demoed. It just means they need to be made safe.
Oh.
Making them safe could be anything from boarding up where windows used to be that are knocked out, or doors that are no longer lockable, and you have,
I think Miss Colby knows who I'm talking about, a yellow house over on David Avenue.
It's gone.
Huh?
They moved.
I know, but it's,
Oh, yeah.
I don't see anybody ever being able to fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're
yeah,
saying.
being habitable is different than being unsafe.
Okay, all right. That's all I need. Thank you.
Any other questions for the service director? Thank you. Mr. Reed?
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
Your time.
Only thing I've got tonight, we've got ordinances 23 and 24 for appropriations in the budget. We also have ordinance number 32, and I believe the chief may want to speak a little bit about it. It's appropriating money. They were awarded grant funds, $3,600 for training. So we're asking that council puts that in the line item budget for their training, so that you'll appropriate that for him so he can use it and continue his training. And then you've got an ordinance 35, and that's for Lillian Jones, which is their budgeted money for this year. It's just moving from the trust to where they can use it, utilize it. So if we can get those all through, it'd be a great help to us.
Any
That's all I
questions?
have.
Any questions for Mr. Reed? Thank you, Mr. Reed. We'll move on to that portion of the agenda, ordinances and resolutions. We will begin, we have two on third reading. We will begin with ordinance 2323. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance approving additional appropriations in the various water, sewer, and garbage funds and declaring an emergency.
Discussion. Mr. Swackhammer?
As Mr. Reed mentioned, this is this third reading. This is a transfer in, transfer out. So 23 and 24 go together. If we're not going to pass both, there's no use in passing either.
Other discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters. Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree. Bach.
Yes.
Ordinance 2323 is duly adopted. Next, for council consideration is ordinance 2423. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance transferring funds from the various water, sewer, and garbage funds. Transfer out to the transfer in funds of water utility reserve, sewer utility reserve, and garbage utility reserve funds, and declaring an emergency.
Discussion. Mr. Swackhammer?
Again, the reserve funds was established a year ago by council. This is funding those reserve funds.
Other discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk. Crabtree. Bach.
Yes.
Ordinance 2423 is duly adopted. Next, for council consideration is ordinance 3123. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance repealing and amending the City of Jackson's codified ordinance section 557.01 governing weed control. Supposed to say and declaring an emergency.
It didn't have the
It doesn't
emergency
have
language
anything
in it.
else in it, so I think not.
I
All right.
think we're going to...
Governing weed control.
Can I get a motion to adopt ordinance 3123 as presented to council?
Motion to
Mr.
adopt.
Elliott, is there a second? Mr. Crabtree? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Discussion. Mr. Swackhammer?
Yes, as council is very much aware, there are many properties that the city has come into ownership of that we cannot improve upon. Some of these are in flood zone areas. Some of them have been purchased with FEMA grants where it doesn't allow you to do anything with them. And we were looking at options on being able to create some areas. If you look at section B of this, sections for wildlife habitat, for being able to plant additional trees within the city, to do many of these other things, and not just mow them all the time, or not mow them. So what we're looking at here is for us to be able to have the option to have these set aside to use in some of these type of manners throughout the city where they are city-owned properties, and I guess give us a little bit more green space that has some character to it other than just, a mowed lot. And we had briefly talked about it, and before we ever brought it here, around doing some set-aside conservation land And that's really what we're talking about here. We went ahead and put a little bit more definition behind that with section B.
Thank you, Mr. Schweikhammer. Other discussion? Any further action for ordinance 3123? Hearing none, this constitutes the first reading of ordinance 3123. Next, for council consideration is ordinance 3223. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance approving additional appropriations in the Education and Training Fund for police education and declaring an emergency.
Could we get a motion to adopt ordinance 3223 as presented to council? Mr. Peters, is there a second? Mr. Bob? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Discussion. Chief Inch.
This, the 3,600, we actually did something very similar to this last year. I had 2 officers attend CIT training, which is Crisis Intervention Team training. They deal with educating officers on dealing with people in mental and emotional distress. It's an effective training that doesn't cost us a penny to go to, minus the manpower, the salary that we're paying the officers anyway. It's good training, but they offer $1,800 credit per officer that they do for, to give back for additional use by the department. In our system, it goes to the auditor's office, and we just like, there's so much training out there that's necessary. It's good to have. We've done a good job. I think there's been a lot of support for that. A lot of the trainings can be expensive, some of the stuff that we need to receive more training on. So we're asking council with this $3,600 gift that we put it back into the training fund so that we can send more officers, more trainings as we see fit.
Thank you, Chief. Other discussion? Mr. Peters?
I'll move to suspend.
Mr. Peters, second by Mr. Elliott. Discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters. Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree.
Yes.
Discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters. Newkirk. Crabtree. Bach.
Ordinance 3223 is duly adopted. Next, for council consideration is ordinance 3323. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance of the legislative authority of the city of Jackson, Ohio to accept the bid of Jones Stevenson Insurance Agency for commercial line and liability insurance coverage for the city of Jackson as it was the lowest responsive and responsible bid submitted and declaring an emergency.
We have a motion to adopt ordinance 3323 as accepted, or to council. Mr. Newkirk, is there a second? Mr. Elliott? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Discussion, Mr. Schweikhammer.
Yes, there was only 2 bids that came in. One was for a 1-year period only. It was a little bit less on than the 219 here, but it was only guaranteed for 1 year. This is a 3-year guarantee. We feel that this is a better plan for the city long-term over the next 3 years to have a known amount versus not knowing for years 2 and 3. It is the same supplier that we currently have and have had for several years now that we're very happy with. And it does expire, the current contract expires at the end of this month. I would ask council's consideration of passing it tonight.
Other discussion?
Mr. President, I move to suspend the rules.
Motion by Mr. Elliott, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bob. Other discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster. Elliott.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters. Newkirk. Crabtree.
Yes.
Discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters. Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree. Bach.
Yes.
Ordinance 3323 is duly adopted. Next, for council consideration, first reading, ordinance 3423. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance authorizing the Service and Safety Director to advertise for sale and to sell to the highest and best bidder certain motor vehicles and equipment now owned by the city but no longer needed for a municipal purpose pursuant to RC Section 721.15 and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to adopt ordinance 3423 as presented to council? Ms. Colby, is there a second? Mr. Crabtree? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Discussion, Mr. Swackhammer.
Yes, the final page, backside of it, has a list of the actual vehicles as well as it says dumpsters, various sizes. There's a quantity of 13. If you want to drive down by the impound lot, you would be able to see those dumpsters as well as the vehicles.
Other discussion?
These are out-of-service city vehicles.
Correct.
Any other discussion?
Doesn't seem like we should just keep holding on to them if we're gonna try to sell them. So I'll move to suspend the rules so we can put these for sale.
Motion by Mr. Peters, second by Mrs. Colby. Discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster. Elliott.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters. Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree.
Yep.
Bach.
Yes.
Further discussion? Ms. Kuhn?
Foster.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree.
Yes.
Bach.
Yes.
Ordinance 3423 is duly adopted. Next, for council consideration is ordinance 3523. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance amending and repealing ordinance 60-16 and authorizing an increase of the stipend paid for the positions of fire chief and assistant fire chief.
Is there a motion to adopt ordinance 3523 as presented to council?
Motion to adopt?
Motion by Mr. Elliott. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Newkirk. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Discussion. Mr. Swackhammer.
Yes, two main items here to discuss. One is, I'll give you what the old rates were. It was $465 for the chief, it was $365 for the assistant chief. But a bigger part of that is, this is not a wage, this is a stipend. And that is, and it is clearly identified, this is a volunteer fire department service. Over the last 2+ years, I've been working with, and you're going to have another ordinance coming up that talks about the pay for the fire department, in rewriting and updating the fire department handbook. Hadn't been done for many years. Cindy, did you bring a copy? Okay, so we have one printed copy here if somebody wants to look at it. We have it online if anybody wants to look at it, so that you can see the changes into the new policy and procedure handbook for the fire department. But some of these things that we're doing is to clean up and clearly identify that we do have a volunteer fire department.
Thank you, Mr. Schweikhammer. Other comment? Discussion?
So what does that do with those positions? Like, what happens if you're changing, they're employees right now, right? Both the chief and the assistant chief are employees?
Yeah, with the, theirs, they are, but this is clearly identifying it as a volunteer department. We're changing the stipend to, on theirs, it impacts the others much greater for the firefighters in that one. But that's just, part of that is cleanup in language to truly reflect the type of department we have. And plus, we did feel that a little increase was needed for the additional hours needed for their reporting and so forth. So it's not much, considering it's been a few years since any change at all's been made.
Other discussion? Any further action on ordinance 3523? Hearing none, this constitutes the first reading of ordinance 3523. Next, for council consideration is ordinance 3623. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance repealing and amending the City of Jackson's codified ordinance sections 133.01 and 133.04 regarding personnel and compensation within the fire department.
The chair would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 3623 as presented to council.
Move to adopt.
Mr. Elliott, is there a second? Mr. Crabtree? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Discussion. Mr. Swackhammer.
Yeah, if you'll flip to the backside where it's Exhibit A, there's several changes here. One, it clearly identifies again the volunteer status that I mentioned earlier. It also eliminates or does the strike through on the number of volunteers. We are actually requesting the creation of 2 new levels within the fire department, one being auxiliary members and one being cadets. The auxiliary members are those individuals that would not be required to go through the training for actual entry into a home or the handling of hazardous materials and so forth. They would be more of a support group. We find with the few individuals that we have, I mean, we're up to a little over 10 right now, we could use half that many again just in support roles. And when you're tying up your trained personnel in roles not needed for training, you're not being as efficient as we could be for our citizens. And we do have individuals that says, hey, I don't want to have to go through the training to be a firefighter to enter in, but I'd like to be a part of it. I can help. I can help the fire department in these other ways to take the relief off of the firefighters. And so we looked at how that might be, and we've found other cities that have set up this auxiliary group, and they would be clearly identified either with the wording on their jacket or whatever that they were an auxiliary group. But they would not be the ones that would be, like I said, entering fires or handling hazardous material or having that type of training requirement. The second group is cadets, and this is for a younger age group, age 15 to 18, to get exposure to the fire department, what a fire department does, and they would not be involved in runs. There'd be more activities around the department. They'd still be learning how to run or operate certain equipment, trying to get them as much hand-on exposure in hopes that as they got older, they would want to be part of the volunteer fire department that we have here in Jackson and be part of the community service it offers. So we had met actually with the school principal and superintendent, Chief Channel, myself, and a member from the state fire marshal's office. They were very receptive to this and presenting it to the high school students, because high school students now are required to have some community service, and they said this would be an ideal way for people to get their community service hours associated with graduation. And so we were glad to see that they were on board, and I commend them for that. Other things we're talking about here. Before, it was on an hourly basis that there was compensation being provided. And we have been told over the past that a stipend is the way it should be handled, and it should be the same for any event they go to. It's a compensation for their time and effort to get there. So what we've done is established a $30 stipend for coming to the fire station. That's where you get on your truck. That's where most of the time they do their training at. That's where they do their work details. So those events, there will be provided a $30 stipend based on the role that the chief or assistant chief or their designee turns in. It's no longer based on how many hours that somebody is out on a call or how many hours they're at a training class. We looked at what we felt that our budget and, could afford, as well as what was a fair compensation for people's time of being there, not for their time, but a time of getting there to the event. And this one has seemed to pass the mustard of the individuals that we spoke to and helps us clearly get away from not being a per hour basis. Now, we do still compensate and pay for the additional licenses or trainings of a firefighter 1, firefighter 2, those items that only our firefighters would be involved with, not our cadets, not our auxiliary. It's no different than any of our other trainings that we reimburse for, whether they be at the water plant, wastewater plant. The city pays for those as well.
Thank you, Mr. Swackhammer. Other discussion?
I got a million questions. First one, you talked that other cities had auxiliary members. What other cities have those? Since this is first reading, so I can read a little bit more about.
Let me go get my list. I didn't bring my list here.
If you could just give it to me, if you could send it to me.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Okay, all right. The other one was you talked about the budget. What's the difference? What would the difference be if we were using the system today, or say last year? What's the difference in the budget? Is it a big difference? Is it close to the same? Is it?
Yeah, last year was the record number of runs that the city has ever had. Not even over by a little, by about 20% over the highest number we've had in the past. And so we looked at what that cost us. We also looked at, we had more employees this year than we did last year. So we took the same money basically and said, okay, with a new amount of employees, if we go back to our average number of runs that we've had over the last couple years, it'd be about a wash.
Okay, and then another question is when they have their work details, they're not gonna get paid by the hour. So what happens if they call work detail and they've got 20 members and all 20 members happen to show up on the same night, and what may take 2 or 3 hours on an average night doesn't? They're just gonna.
I wish we had that problem to address, Ryan, I really do.
Okay.
Right now, we're lucky to get 3 or 4 individuals.
And is that because of the pay?
I couldn't answer that, because I would hate to say as a volunteer department, the pay is not really what they're doing. It's because they want to do the service.
And then the last question I have is in the bottom here where we added award of stipends will be determined by the chief, assistant chief, or the designee. Members must be present for the full event or until approval to leave is given by the chief, assistant chief, or to me, that seems like that can cause issues if you're giving one person the sole discretion of whether someone should be paid or not.
Well, when you have especially when you have events, you get to the point to where you may not need all of the resources at events, especially if we have multiple trucks out. So if we get far enough along in the event, we may want to turn trucks around, send them back to the station, get them prepared in case there is another event going somewhere else. So we may end an event with people to go back to do something else where others would have to stay and stay with the, you know, if we're looking for hot spots or still have some hot spots. Same way with, as you mentioned, the work detail. If the work detail starts to slow down and the work's done, but we've got, you know, maybe somebody is repacking a truck and they may be there a little bit longer than, you know, rather than having people just stand around. So that things get staggered in that effect, that it's going to be up to the chief, assistant chief, or in their absent, whomever they've named as their designee to determine when it's okay for individuals to leave. Individuals will not be able to leave at their own discretion and still receive the stipend.
And the last question is, we have this mutual aid agreement throughout the county now. How do you see that factoring into this? Is that the reason why we have a record number of runs from the previous year, or does it even have any, you know, connection to that?
Yeah, no, I can't say there's no direct correlation for sure, because it's not just mutual aid, it's automatic aid. So we've been on runs to where you'll get partway there and they turn around and they'll call you off, because once the first department got there, either one, they had it under control, or it was not as was relayed to the 911 operator, or, you know, the event just wasn't as big as what it actually was. So I can't say that isn't directly related to the scenario there. We went into that automatic aid scenario because not only Jackson, but many of the other departments around us were down to so few people that you needed departments, multiple departments, to come out just to get enough to fight a structure fire. We are looking at, and believe we have found a way to offset part of these costs going forward, but we want to present it to the county fire chiefs. We'd rather see it come as a county-wide effort. One or two of the departments are already charging for runs. I guess most insurance policies allow that. And we've done some investigation into that. But we feel that not only Jackson, but all the county departments are hurting for funding, at least most are, and that this is a way that the insurance policies play a role in helping to fund these fire departments.
Other questions? Other discussion?
Just a quick one.
Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, when's the last time we had some sort of adjustment to this structure?
What type of?
Has it been a while? Has it been?
The fire department handbook there, I believe it's over 20 years old since it's been updated. It was last updated. Does it say on the cover sheet, Dan?
It says revisions, yeah, published in 91, revised August 2005, and then revised May 2023.
Almost 20 years.
Other discussion? Hearing none, this constitutes the first reading of ordinance 3623. Next, for council's consideration, ordinance 3723. Ms. Kuhn?
An ordinance for transfer of funds from Lillian Jones Museum Trust Fund, transfer out to Lillian Jones Museum Operating Fund, transfer in, and declaring an emergency.
We have a motion to adopt ordinance 3723 as presented to council. Mr. Peters, is there a second? Mr. Newkirk seconds. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. The motion is carried. Discussion, Mr. Reed.
These funds set up beginning of this year for their budget. We're starting to run low, and we set it out for the transfer in, it just has not been done yet, so if council will see fit, I would appreciate them moving the money.
I have a question, Mr. Reed. What's the balance left in that trust fund?
I want to say 360,000. Between 360, right around there, I think. I'll get you a hard number on that.
Other discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Peters?
I'll move to suspend the rules to transfer the money for their operations.
Second, Mr. Bob? Other discussion? Ms. Coon?
Foster.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree.
Yes.
Bach.
Yes.
Discussion? Ms. Coon?
Foster.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes.
Colby.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Newkirk.
Yes.
Crabtree.
Yes.
Bach.
Yes.
Ordinance 3723 is duly adopted. This concludes our resolutions and ordinance time on the agenda. I thank you, council, for your diligent work. Next on your agenda is correspondence. I don't believe we've had any. So I will open up to old business. Any old business to be brought before council? Mr. Peters?
I just had a question. I received that email, under correspondence, I guess. The email that the mayor was talking about from soil and water conservation of another county. Has that guy reached out to you other than that email? Like, I read through it, but I have a lot of questions. Is that something that you guys think that we should participate in? I noticed like some of it was talking about the old rail bed going west out of town here, giving other information or?
Tracy reached out to that person today and we do plan to meet with them and see if there's something we want to do there. Yep. And she was trying to get that set up. I don't know if she did or not. Yeah, we at least want to explore it.
Other old business?
I have
Mr.
a-
Elliott?
I meant to ask the mayor, the alley that runs parallel to Main off of Broadway, it runs behind all the, behind Michael's, and it's in bad shape, and especially in a few places, it's in really bad shape. Have you ever considered that alley, or? You know the one I'm referring to?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll discuss that with the service director first thing in the morning.
okay. Just thought I'd.
No, it's not made our paving list yet, but
I
we
think
haven't
it's,
got to any alleys yet.
oh, okay,
But,
okay,
it's in the long-term plan.
okay.
Other items for old business? Hearing none, we'll move to new business. I believe Mr. Swackhammer had brought forth a topic of discussion on taking bids for wire and for poles. They're electric poles. Do you want to further that, Mr. Swackhammer?
Yes, just as, one way to help keep the yard cleaned up, but another way, those are some items that don't visualize as well to sell, because you can't tell, most of that is by weight is what they're trying to buy by. And when you look at a pile there, you really, especially a photo, you really can't tell how much weight's there. And so I'm just looking at a way to keep that more organized, as well as keep the turnover going a little faster, and see what a short-term contract, one-year contract or more looks like, and what we think, and what stipulations do we put on? Do they bid for the one-year period? Does it go based upon the current market value, which we know fluctuates all over the place? And I'd be looking to Joe to help give us some guidelines on what the wording would have to be for something like that if we decide to go that direction.
Okay, we can do that.
If that's something council has no objections to.
So would we encourage some local, I would guess, some local vendors maybe to reach out to you with some ideas, or?
Local county ones that reach out to me and said that they would like to provide the city with that service. I believe that, to be fair, though, this would have to be a bid contract. It's not something we could just enter into someone on.
Correct.
Just to clarify, so would we be going in contract with a scrap yard or just some random guy who wants to pick up scrap?
Well, yeah, I think it could be either, because you have scrap yards, which was one of the ones that reached out to me, that, depending on whether it's copper or aluminum or whatever, they would like to provide various, because we already segregated anyway. But if you've got somebody that's got a unique market for one particular type of metal versus all three, maybe you've got somebody that would give you a better rate on, let's say, the copper versus the aluminum or the other.
I think it's a good idea. There's no sense in letting it just sit around and then we sell it whenever we get the chance. If someone wants to buy it, then let them buy it. It's literally trash at this point. The
Yeah.
other thing that you talked about was the electric poles, though.
Yeah, the old electric poles, ones that are either broken and taken out, or as we replace with new ones where we've had to go higher. There are some full poles there as well. And being able to not do that on a one or, twice a year cycle, to see if there's somebody that would be interested in bidding those on a per foot basis, basically. And they take everything and then they can disperse, resell, whatever they want, but it just keeps the lot cleaned up.
I mean, do we have the option just to list those for sale to anyone at any time without a bidding process? Say, hey, these are, they're 20 feet long, those ones are $200, the 300-foot long ones are $300. Like, is there a way to, you know what I mean? Like, is there a way to just list those for sale without a bidding process where anybody who's like, you know what, I need a utility pole, and I'm gonna go over there and buy one? I'm sure you can't just go to Lowe's and buy one of those.
Well, I'm sure that, it takes manpower just to sit there and man the yard. To make ourselves available. I would rather have somebody come in once a month or whatever and just, we measure them, they take them. We don't have to sit there and sell them onesie twosies at a time. They don't sell that, they don't sell for big dollars.
Do you have a vendor? I mean, is there a vendor that does that?
No, we don't.
I mean, my first thought is, I think of agricultural for people that might want to build some fence agriculturally, but they would probably want to come in and cut them, buy them and cut them in 8-foot sections to be a viable way to haul them out of there. To haul full telephone poles out would be somebody fairly specialized, I would think, with that.
Well, I wouldn't have a problem if they wanted to cut them to take them, but they were buying the whole pole length, not just what they wanted out of it.
Absolutely.
One other question, do they still put creosote on those poles, or are they toxic, or do we
I
have to
don't
worry
think
about anything like that?
I don't think in the state of Ohio that you can creosote them. There is a neighboring state you can, but I don't think, as far as the aspect of creosote, that could be applied
Not
anymore.
even like old ones that we would have, right?
I doubt it. It's been kind of outlawed, I believe, in our area for quite a while.
Mr. Reed, you had
Well, I just was gonna make a suggestion on the metal pricing. Copper can change 3 times value in a year. That would have to almost be tied to something, or you would have to have a guarantee, because let's say I bid $4 a pound for copper, copper goes down to 3. How do you make me buy it?
Well, if you've entered into a contract,
I understand, but how do you make me buy?
Well, you could, I would think you could enter into a contract that's tied to the pricing, the
Right,
market,
that's what I-
the
that's
market,
what I would like
the
to-
market price and what, then a stipulation of percentage on the market price as it
Right.
fluctuates up and down would be, yeah, I would think you
well,
wouldn't
I'd
want
want to be fair both directions, because if
Well, that's what
if I bid it at $3 a pound, which that's market value today, I'm saying if that was, and it goes up over the next year, you know, it's got to be fair both directions.
Well, that's what he's saying. Let's say if somebody is giving, if market value is $2, they offer us 10% under market value when we go, at any point. That way it always they go up or they go down. Or somebody says they'll do 5%, but if you tie it to market value, they would be setting it based upon what they're willing to do it for commission-wise.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's something that won't work, because if you play the markets, I would wait till it's as low as possible to go pick it up. If you wait and do it based on the market versus a set cost.
What stops us from taking it to the scrapyard? What stops the city employees from saying, okay, we got a truckload of this, let's take it to the scrapyard? What stops that?
Most of the time, a truckload would be worth more than $1,000.
The statute says anything above $1,000 is supposed to be sold to the highest bidder. So I was going to suggest you could, if you get smaller lots, 1 or 2 poles, you could sell those individually without a public sale, just to get rid of them. And you could do market price for that. That would be acceptable.
I think the pole price you could set and anybody could come get them. So I don't think there's a market that will fluctuate much like the copper.
Yeah, unless they're the metal poles or something,
Yeah.
possibly.
True.
Okay. Well, maybe one of the options is smaller truckloads.
Yeah.
There was a time in the past history that the city did scrap. And that they actually ran scrap to scrap yards.
Well, let's take this under consideration and then come back to us next month with some other, some ideas that others may have incorporated to you in regards to that.
Fair enough.
I do have a question. Was on Carr Street. Here,
Oh, yes.
a few days ago, and there's the home on Carr Street. I just wondered if there was any news or anything.
There is, they finally got the bank, PNC Bank, has served everyone, and they filed a motion for default judgment. I don't think it's set for hearing or been granted yet, but, so once that's granted, then there'll be an order for sale. It'll go for appraisal, and then sale will have to sell for 2/3 of the value. I don't know what the value's going to be, it'll be set, so if it's set high, it probably is not going to sell. It'll go back and be reappraised. So at that point, the city can bid on it. So can anyone else. The one issue with, initially, we were looking to try to find the owner to try to work out a sale, but there's a $70-some thousand Medicaid lien on the property, if I remember right. Was that about what it was? The mortgage wasn't horrible, but the Medicaid lien was. I certainly don't expect the property will bring anywhere close to that, but it'll clear the lien.
One other item that I have, due to some scheduling for the month of July, our July 10th meeting, which will be the first, we are looking to probably cancel that meeting on the 10th and only have one meeting in the month of July. That will be July the 24th. So we will have our meeting on the 26th, but then I will say the president and the president pro tem are both out of town that week, so we look to maybe just have one meeting then on the 24th and come back for the end of the month. there's no objections. So that will be our schedule. Anything else under new business? Mr. Bob?
Mr. Swackhammer and Mayor Evans, you guys deal with problems every day, but this will be a good thing for you to do. I think everybody sitting here would agree that the work that city workers are doing right now, all departments, Mr. Hench's department, the fire department, everybody, I think that you guys are in contact with them more than we are. And I think that words of encouragement, words of just a fine job that they're doing, I think they're entitled to these. They don't make any money off them, but I think it'll make them feel good. I think that the things that are happening in this city are very encouraging, and they are a large part of it, and they should be appreciated and told that. And like I say, you folks tend to deal with them more than the rest of us, but I think that everybody sitting here can agree with what I've said, that they're doing a fine job, everybody, and they should be told that if you see them, and I'm sure you do. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Bob.
I'll agree with what Mr. Bob said, and especially for Mr. Hinch. I think you guys are doing a great job.
Yep.
The income tax really obviously helped not just your department out, but the rest of the city out as well. So the citizens need to be thanked for that as well. But I will say, I live on a busy intersection, and, you know, I wake up in the middle of the night and I'll look out and I'll see a police car driving by. So that might be once a week, that might be twice a month, or sitting somewhere where they're seen. And I know they may just be sitting there, but that's a deterrent for people that are out doing things that they should be doing. So
Thank you, that's appreciated.
Any other new business? Mr. Swackhammer?
I'm going to add on what Mr. Bob said also, that the residents of this city need to be commended as well, because the work you see our city employees doing out there is all because of the funding that they've given us in most cases to put in new streets, curbs, sidewalks, and so forth. So none of this would be possible without the residents' support, and they're the ones that need as much kudos as anybody.
Thank you, Mr. Swackhammer. Anything else? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Peters, there's a second. Mr. Newkirk? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.